Welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going to be tackling a pretty big issue, soil degradation in India.
Yeah.
And, we've got a whole bunch of sources. We've got some news articles, some reports, even some like firsthand accounts. And
Yeah.
it seems like they're all pointing to something pretty big here.
Yeah. It's a problem that goes way beyond just dirt.
Yeah.
We're talking about a problem that affects, food security
Right.
and climate change.
Yeah. And that's why we're here. The whole shebang.
Yeah, we're going to do a deep dive and try to break down all the different aspects of this.
Yeah.
Did you know that a third of India's land is already degraded?
It's crazy.
That's a huge amount. It's like
Yeah.
taking a giant eraser and just wiping out all that farmland.
Yeah, it's a mind-boggling statistic. We're talking about 115 to 120 million hectares.
Wow.
That's, just to put that in perspective, that's larger than many countries,
Wow.
entire countries. And of that, 83.69 million hectares is dry land undergoing desertification. Oh, wow. Okay, so we've got the scale of the problem.
Mm-hmm.
But for somebody like me who doesn't really, know too much about soil science,
Yeah.
what does this actually mean?
Well, imagine a farmer, in India trying to grow crops and the soil is just exhausted. It's like trying to, draw water from a dry well.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. So what you're going to see is lower yields, less food being produced, which means less income for the people who really depend on that.
Yeah.
And we have to remember that India is a major, major player in the global food system.
Right.
So this has a ripple effect. It's not just contained within India's borders.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's not just about India's food security, but
Yes,
the global food security.
Yeah.
And I was reading in one of the articles that Rajasthan is facing a really tough situation in particular.
Oh, yeah. They've got a major problem on their hands.
Yeah.
Over 21 million hectares degraded, mainly due to wind erosion. So that topsoil is literally just being swept away, leaving behind something that's just not fertile anymore.
Right. So it's just like sand at that point.
Pretty much, yeah.
Okay. So that's a real world picture of what soil degradation looks like. Now let's dig into what is actually causing all this. It sounds like it's not just one thing.
No, it's definitely not just one villain in the story. It's more like a whole gang of culprits.
Okay.
And they're all working together to make this problem worse.
So who are some of the main culprits?
Well, we've got unsustainable agricultural practices.
Okay.
Like using way too many chemicals, planting the same crop over and over again, which depletes the soil.
So it's they're forcing the soil to produce without giving it
Exactly.
or the nutrients.
You're not giving it the TLC it needs.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, we've got deforestation and urbanization.
Gobbling up land, right?
Yeah, and that's just using up even more.
Exactly. And you think about these big, infrastructure projects,
Right.
the Shardham Highway,
Yeah.
it's all disrupting the land and making it more vulnerable to erosion.
Yeah, so we're losing forests, building more cities, and then on top of that, not treating the soil well in that first place.
Like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah. What about water management?
Oh, yeah. Water.
I feel like that plays a role, too.
Absolutely. It's a huge factor. Overpumping groundwater, using inefficient irrigation techniques, this can lead to salinization.
Right, and that's where salt builds up in the soil, and then nothing can really grow.
It's like trying to grow a tomato plant in, salt water.
Right.
It's just not going to thrive.
Yeah, and I read that Punjab, in particular, is dealing with that salinity problem.
Oh, yeah. Punjab is a classic example.
Yeah.
Of how even something as essential as water, if it's not managed properly, can become a problem.
Right, so too much of a good thing can be a bad thing.
Exactly.
And of course, we can't forget about climate change.
Oh, climate change, the big one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
More extreme weather events like droughts and floods
right.
are not really helping the situation.
No, it's like climate change is this amplifier.
Okay.
It just makes all these other problems even worse. The droughts stress the soil, floods just wash away that valuable topsoil,
Right.
and the whole cycle just accelerates.
Right, so it just compounds all the other issues.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a pretty grim picture.
Yeah.
But it's not all doom and gloom.
Okay.
There are solutions out there.
Okay.
And some pretty innovative ones.
Okay, so let's hear some good news for a change. What are some of the things that people are doing to tackle this?
Well, one of the most promising solutions is promoting sustainable farming practices.
Okay.
It's all about working with nature,
Hmm.
not against it.
So instead of relying on all those like chemical-heavy practices we talked about, what would a sustainable farm look like?
Think about organic farming, crop rotation, agroforestry, all methods that help restore that soil health and improve that biodiversity.
So it's kind of like giving the soil like a spa day.
Yeah, exactly.
It's like getting back to...
Giving it a little break.
Yeah, exactly.
Pampering it a bit.
And I imagine it also helps reduce that reliance on synthetic inputs that are kind of doing more harm than good.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's not just individual farmers who are leading the charge, you know?
Right.
There are some big government initiatives that are aimed at promoting sustainable agriculture.
Right. And I read about the soil health card scheme.
Oh, yeah.
That seems like a really cool idea.
Yeah, it's like a report card for your soil.
Yeah.
It gives farmers the information they need to make better decisions about land management.
Yeah.
So that's a big one. And then there's also the Paramparagat Krishi Vikas Yojana, which promotes organic farming. And then the Pradhan Mantri Krishi Sinchay Yojana, which focuses on improving water management and irrigation techniques.
Right. So it's kind of like a multi-pronged approach.
Exactly.
So there's a lot of action happening on the policy front. But I'm curious, what about on the technology side?
Oh, yeah.
Are there any cool innovations that are helping restore degraded soil?
Oh, absolutely. One of the most exciting developments is conservation agriculture. And this is really changing the way we think about farming.
I remember reading about the happy seeder technology.
Yes.
That was really fascinating.
Yeah, it's a no-till farming technique that helps retain that soil moisture and prevent that erosion.
Right. So instead of tilling the soil, which actually, makes it more vulnerable, they're finding ways to actually plant the crops without disrupting it.
Yeah, it's all about minimizing that soil disturbance.
Okay.
Keeping that soil structure intact.
So it's like a win-win.
Exactly. A win for the farmer, a win for the soil.
Right. Okay, cool.
And speaking of win-wins, there's this other really fascinating approach called bioremediation.
Okay, bioremediation.
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with that one.
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
Yeah.
But it's actually pretty amazing. We're talking about using microbes and plants to clean up pollutants in the soil.
So it's like using nature.
Exactly. It's like having this little army of, tiny biological helpers going in and doing the dirty work for us.
So instead of using harsh chemicals and things, we're kind of turning to nature.
We're letting nature do its thing.
Yeah. Okay. And that's been successful.
Yeah, they've actually done some really cool pilot projects in India.
Okay.
It's showing some real potential for restoring contaminated land.
So we've got sustainable farming practices, government initiatives, conservation agriculture, bioremediation, like a pretty diverse toolkit for tackling this problem. But I imagine it's not just as simple as like implementing these solutions.
No, you're right. It's not a quick fix. It's not a magic bullet.
Right. What are some of the challenges that stand in the way?
Well, one of the biggest hurdles is that we have a very fragmented policy framework.
Okay.
The policies that are related to soil management, they're kind of spread across multiple ministries and schemes.
Right.
And that can lead to a lack of coordination, a lack of focus.
So like everyone's working on a different part of the puzzle.
Exactly.
But they're not really.
They don't see the big picture.
Right. Exactly.
And then there's the challenge of just inadequate implementation and monitoring.
Okay.
We need to make sure that these great programs that are being designed are actually being delivered on the ground effectively.
Right. So it's one thing to have a good plan.
Exactly.
But it's another to actually put it into practice.
Put it into action, yeah.
And that requires like accountability.
Absolutely.
Transparency.
Transparency, yeah.
And like regular monitoring to make sure that things are actually on track.
You got it. And then another key challenge is the need for more regional specificity.
Okay.
A lot of the soil health initiatives, they're kind of generic.
Right.
They don't necessarily address the unique challenges that are faced by different regions.
Yeah. It makes sense because something that works in Rajasthan, which is like really dry and windy, isn't going to work in Punjab, which is dealing with completely different issues.
Different soil types, different climate, different challenges.
Yeah. It's all about tailoring the solution to the specific environmental.
Hit the nail on the head.
Actual context.
And speaking of tailoring solutions, we also need a stronger link between research and implementation.
Okay.
India has some fantastic soil research institutions.
Yeah.
But often their findings don't make it into the hands of the farmers who could really use this information.
So it's like all this valuable knowledge is just kind of locked away.
It's like a library where nobody's checking out the books.
Right. We need to bridge that gap between the lab and the field.
We need to get that information out there. And then there's another kind of emerging threat that we need to be aware of, and that is microplastic contamination.
Microplastics in the soil.
Yeah, this is a relatively new problem, but it's a growing concern.
And how is that happening?
Well, these tiny little particles of plastic, they're finding their way into the soil through things like agricultural plastics, wastewater, even atmospheric deposition. So they're coming from all these different sources.
Right. So it's like we're adding plastic to the foundation.
Yeah, we're kind of unintentionally, adding this to our food system.
Right. And do we know what the long-term...
Well, we're still learning about the long-term impacts, but, clearly...
This is something we need to take seriously.
It's something we need to be aware of and figure out how to address.
Okay. So it sounds like there's a lot of work to be done.
Yeah.
But there are also a lot of really promising solutions.
Oh, absolutely.
And it seems like there's a lot of people working on this issue.
Yeah, a lot of dedicated folks.
What are some key things that you hope listeners take away from our deep dive so far?
Well, first and foremost, I hope they remember that soil is a living resource. It's not just dirt beneath our feet.
Right.
It's a complex ecosystem.
Yeah.
It's teeming with life, and it supports, our entire food system.
It's like the foundation of our very existence.
Exactly. It's something that we often take for granted.
Yeah.
And secondly, while soil degradation is a serious problem, it's not insurmountable.
Okay.
Solutions exist, actions being taken. But we need to keep pushing for that greater awareness.
Right.
And continue those efforts.
So it's a message of hope, but also a call to action.
Exactly. You got it.
Yeah. Definitely a wake-up call for all of us to, pay attention to what's happening right under our feet.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
And it's not just about India, right? This is like
No, not at all.
a global issue.
This is a global challenge. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
Healthy soil, it's essential for growing the food we eat, cleaning the water we drink.
Right.
It even plays a role in regulating our climate.
Right. It's all connected.
Yeah.
So what can we do about it? I mean, it's easy to get overwhelmed by like the scale of this.
I get it. It feels huge, right?
Yeah.
But, every little bit helps. We can all make choices in our lives that support soil health.
Like what?
Composting our food waste, maybe choosing products from companies that are prioritizing those sustainable practices.
Okay.
Or even just advocating for policies that protect our soil.
So being conscious consumers and like informed citizens.
Exactly.
We can all make a difference.
Yeah, absolutely. And remember, healthy soil, it's not just about survival. It's also a source of beauty and wonder. Think about that rich, earthy smell after a rain shower.
Yeah.
Or like the feeling of that soft, fertile soil between your fingers.
Right.
These are all gifts from healthy soil.
Yeah, it's like a reminder to appreciate those simple things.
Yeah.
And protect what we have.
Exactly. Well, this deep dive, we've just scratched the surface of this incredibly complex and important issue.
But I feel like we've laid a good foundation, at least.
Oh, absolutely.
For understanding.
Yeah, and if anyone wants to learn more, I highly encourage you to check out the links to the sources we used for this episode.
There's a ton of information out there.
Oh, yeah.
For anyone who's interested in learning more, and for our listeners, remember, knowledge is power. The more we understand about, the challenges that are facing our planet, the better equipped we'll be to actually find solutions.
Absolutely. To everyone out there, let's remember, soil is life. Let's do our part to protect this precious resource.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.